To you about global Muslim life tonight. So I speak all around the world, and when I ask people, what do you think of when you think of global Muslim life? As we know, in the United States, people might have a certain concept that they think of. To me, over the last 3 years, I've run a media platform called Ummah Wide, Ummah being the Arabic word for community. And so this is what I think about when I think of global Muslim life. Beauty, diversity, and that this is one of the most fascinating and beautiful global stories with what is one of the most diverse groups of human beings on this planet, which is the global Muslim community. Today, Muslims make up 1/5 of our world. By 2070, it is expected, according to Pew Research, that Muslims will make up 1/3 of humanity. This isn't a story that we can continue to misunderstand, or something that we can mess around with the president saying the things that he's saying about Muslims. So with our company, Life Beyond Borders, really what we want to ask are these questions. How do we live beyond borders? And we don't think of borders just as the imaginary pieces of line designed by colonial governments, but we imagine it as what are the borders that live within each of us, that have to do with faith, that have to do with race, that have to do with the way that we think and the ways that we identify. And I think a really important border that we have to touch on, and I haven't heard it talked about much here today, is the border of white supremacy and the role that white supremacy and technology just played in this election, where Peter Thiel worked to help the newly elected Trump administration build a whole data platform, and they used that to suppress the vote amongst people of color and progressive whites. There's been one story written about this that I've seen, it's on Medium, and it's not talked about anywhere, but that's a white supremacist act of technology. So if we're going to talk about diversity, we also have to talk about white supremacy and how it lives within us as a country. So how did I get here, right? I'm a white boy from the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. But I was blessed to have all these hip-hop artists, Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, teach me about Islam. And it changed and transformed my life 15 years ago. But it was really when I read these verses from the Quran that I think is very important for us to mention here today, where God says a command to humanity. This isn't to Muslims. It says, we've made you into nations and tribes so that you know one another. This work of diversity, inclusion, difference, and transformation is not easy work. It's hard work. To know, to recognize one another is deep, lifelong work. And like I said, it involves breaking down those borders that are within each of us, especially amongst white people. And those verses from the Quran really have driven all the work that we've been doing around the world, starting in the Bay Area. And I know Arabic is scary in America for some reason, and people get kicked off flights for speaking Arabic right now. But this piece of Arabic calligraphy says Bay Area, right? And so we started in the Bay, but we realized that with this huge global Muslim population all over the world, that we had to get out of the Bay, because each of these dots represent a startup ecosystem where Muslims are making huge impacts at every level. Excuse me, people in the back, it's really loud. Excuse me. Sorry. So again, to think about this is the global Muslim community is also one of the largest emerging markets in the world, with more than 400 million English-speaking Muslims throughout the planet. So even from a tech perspective, from a business perspective, it makes sense to think about it as a community. So over the last few years, like I said, we've gotten all over the world. I'm actually based in Kuala Lumpur right now, in Malaysia. And we've really built with these ecosystems. We were on Geeks on a Plane trip with 500 startups last year. And now we've built a set of companies. to respond to this community, right? So Ummawide, the media platform, Empower Change is an online community advocacy platform that our co-founder Linda Sarsour was one of the co-chairs of the Women's March on Washington today. And then Salam Bank is an Islamic finance platform. Because Muslim leadership in tech, so I'm going to go over 4 layers of how to think about Muslim communities in tech globally. Number one, Muslims play major roles at tech companies throughout the world. And according to our research, Muslim founders, hundreds of Muslim founders have raised billions of dollars in investments and had tens of billions of dollars in exits. Despite these numbers, there's still layers of discrimination against Muslim communities. The majority of women who wear the hijab, right, and I actually think this poster is problematic for a number of reasons, and it's a good representation of the problem of the perception of women who wear hijab or the headscarf, is that why should Muslim women have to wrap themselves in the American flag to feel accepted in this country? But yet at tech companies, there's huge discrimination towards people who look publicly Muslim and how they interact with, and there's all kinds of layers of microaggressions, like questioning people's faith or inappropriate questions about terrorism in the workplace. And often this is so bad that even at the founder level, people will change their names. So Muhammad becomes Mo. Even like the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, he got so much slack for his name, which is Shahid, that he changed his name to Shad publicly. This is a billionaire. Imagine everyday workers, people on H-1B visas who feel like they can't say anything when there's discrimination towards them in the workplace. Even this idea of mindfulness, right? There's mindfulness in the workplace, but probably the number one mindfulness practice in the workplace, even in the United States, is the 5 daily prayers that Muslims make, and they oftentimes have to hide to make because maybe they can't have that conversation with their boss or talk about the space that they need to even pray, something that's part of their daily life. The second layer of this is companies and startups focused on Muslim majority populations. And that's the amazing thing about this situation with Trump, is that American corporations are making billions and billions of dollars off of Muslim consumers all over the world. So this is Uber's ad in Dubai during Ramadan. The third layer of this is actually Muslim startups focused specifically on Muslim consumers. So on our platform, ummawide.com, we run an annual article about the 50 most innovative global Muslim startups. And this is where like faith and funding gets most complicated, because even though these businesses will be growing, because Silicon Valley doesn't understand the market, oftentimes the investments won't happen. Although in fashion, modest fashion and food, we've seen major investments. One company, Modanisa, which is based in Turkey, has raised $15 million. And then the other emerging space that's coming up is in the Islamic fintech platform, right, where people are building fintech platforms for Islamic finance. The fourth is more social enterprise product with Muslim-centric branding. So this is Mokhtar Al-Kansali, who's the founder of Port of Mocha. You might have seen his coffee company at Blue Bottle last year, where they had $16 cups of coffee from Yemen. But what was really interesting was that they actually used a quote about coffee from a 10th century Sufi sheikh. Right? So these things are subtly coming and being part of our culture within the American mainstream. But in terms of faith and funding, and even the issue of diversity, right, faith is oftentimes not talked about in conversations of diversity. That's why we have to talk about diversity in an intersectional way, including the issues of faith communities and what they face. Of course, with investors don't know what they don't know. And in Silicon Valley in the United States, people largely don't understand this story of the fact that Muslims will be 1/3 of humanity over the next 50 years, and the size of these markets. Angel investing is still very early in Muslim communities, and honestly, one of the reasons why we're based in Southeast Asia is because funders and investors are much more open in Asia, because that's where the populations are. They understand and they see the successes of many of these companies. Another layer of diversity to talk about quickly is, can diversity also have to do with issues of finance and raising money as founders? The answer for Muslims is that yes, it can, right? Because a lot of Muslims don't want to take money that's attached to interest, and that's part of Islamic finance. And so even from an investment perspective, like I actually was with Kylie Ng, one of the partners here at 500, and I asked him, you know, can you do an Islamic finance-based investment deal? He had to think about it, but he said he was open to it, right, in discussing it. Because it's really about how things are structured, and at the seed level, it's not that complicated, because essentially you're selling equity, and it's an equity deal, and so there's not interest involved. But in the later stages, it becomes a bit more complicated. But it's something to think about for investors when dealing with venture capital and Muslim founders. So next steps. All these Arabic calligraphy designs are by our incredible designer, Qasim Arif. Right, we need to knock out Islamophobia and racism within our communities and throughout the United States. And this can take many forms right now, including, at the corporate level, blocking government requests for data about our communities and about Muslim communities in particular. There was a big petition that was going around over the last few weeks, I'm sure some of you saw it, about whether or not corporations, tech companies would help build a Muslim registry. And so far, Oracle and Amazon are still yet to respond. I don't know how this is a complicated question for companies that have thousands of Muslims employees at it. Oracle's big data platform was an acquisition they made from a Muslim founder named Omar Tawakkol that was a $400 million deal. And yet, they might turn around and use that data platform to spy on Muslim communities. I just don't understand how this is a complicated question. Companies have to review their hiring policies related to visibly Muslim people, and especially women who wear headscarves, and ask, how are we hiring and how are we interviewing these people? Are they getting second interviews, and are they qualified enough? Right? Not only are they qualified enough, they're not getting hired because of how they look. And then finally, tech companies really have to take seriously and put multi-faith and religious-based dialogues as central part of their diversity trainings.